after the flight from Japan, Mr. Carlos Ghosn
Yes.
had an interview in Beirut.
Yes.
And he was prevailing, the problems of the hostage justice in Japan. And the Minister of Justice in Japan said that he should stay in Japan, in our system, to prove himself innocent. What do you think of this?
Can I have a few minutes?
Yes, please.
All right. You're pouring gasoline on my flames here. Just in case any of our viewers are unaware or only casually aware of the case that you've just cited, Carlos Ghosn, the former president and chairman of Nissan, was arrested for accounting fraud and other charges. And that was in November 2018. What happened at Nissan was a coup d'etat, pure and simple. Carlos Ghosn's chosen number 2 betrayed him and enlisted the prosecutors to help secure power at Nissan. On December 29th, 2019, after he'd been held in Japan for more than a year, after he'd been held in Japan for more than a year, including more than 100 days in detention, denied contact from his family or defense attorney during the interrogations. Let me put that more accurately, also in regard to hostage justice. The defendants can meet their attorneys at meetings through a glass window during the day, but the attorneys are not present during the interrogation. So it's not that they don't see their attorneys at all, but the attorneys are not present during the interrogation. Just make that clear. And Ghosn was in the same situation here. On December 29th, in something out of a James Bond movie, he fled Japan and turned up a couple days later in Beirut. On January 8th, he held his first press conference since leaving Japan. And he made this sorts of comments that you've just alluded to. He described in graphic detail the injustice that prevails in the Japanese system. Not to be outdone, Justice Minister Mori Masako held a press conference after Ghosn's press conference that ended up being very late at night. And at her press conference, she said, as you have noted, that Carlos Ghosn should come back and prove his innocence. Unbelievably. Now, she not only said this aloud, she wrote it on Twitter, she wrote it on Facebook. And as maybe we will discuss in a moment, she later tried to walk this back. And she tried to say she had a slip of the tongue. But if she had a slip of the tongue, she also had a slip of the hand, because she not only said it, but she wrote it. Viewers, the Justice Minister of Japan is lying through her teeth. She is a liar. She is the Minister of Justice. I'm so sorry to say. She is trained as a lawyer, and she knows that Japan makes a pretense of the principle of presumption of innocence. Japan, in practice, has a presumption of guilt. As she said clearly, the defendant needs to prove his or her innocence. But they want to pretend to be an advanced nation in terms of legal system, so they pretend to have a presumption of innocence. When she got away, when she got excited and she let her excitement carry her away. She briefly spoke the truth. She accidentally spoke the truth. And when she realized that she had spoken the truth and exposed the reality of Japanese justice, she immediately retracted it. And she went up and she rewrote her Twitter posting, and she went up and rewrote her Facebook posting. And she tried to pretend that she hadn't said, prove his innocence, but he should assert his innocence.
Yes, this is I think this is, one of the heart of the question that, of course, Minister of Justice, she's a lawyer herself.
Yes.
She was studied and trained as a lawyer. And
Right.
of course, she knows presumption of innocence. She never denied this. Very, very important principle. I know that she doesn't really, truly believe in this principle.
Right.
And she believes what is going on in Japan by the prosecutors. She affirms what is going on, and she has no intention to change, or she
Right.
doesn't know what's going on really on the field.
I happen to be from the United States, and the presumption of innocence is axiomatic. We are familiar with phrases like innocent until proven guilty. We're familiar with phrases like the burden of proof is on the accuser. This goes back to Roman law. It goes back before Roman law. Aristotle wrote about this. It's fundamental to the Islamic and the Talmudic traditions. It has prevailed in Western jurisprudence for centuries. Now, a closely related principle is something familiar in the West as Blackstone's ratio. The 18th century British jurist William Blackstone expressed that principle like this. He said, "It is better that 10 guilty individuals escape than that one innocent suffer." That spirit is part of our DNA in the West. And now I'm going to answer your question, and I hope you won't take offense. But even though that spirit is part of our DNA in the West, I'm sorry to say that it is not part of the Japanese DNA. The people in Japan have a vested interest. The people in power here have a vested interest in representing the Japanese legal system as consistent with the legal systems in other industrialized democracies. Japan benefits hugely from its integration into the global economy. And maintaining that integration hinges on fostering perceptions of Japanese jurisprudence as a modern liberal system. And the letter of the law in Japan is totally consistent with the letter of the law in Western democracies. Unfortunately, the practice of the law is very different in Japan. Japanese courtrooms should have a sign over the door that says, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." For the accused here are at the mercy of merciless prosecutors and judges. And those in power have a vested interest in earning a perception of Japan as a civilized nation. And Tadashi, please, let's be fair. Japan is in fact an extremely civilized nation in most respects. Americans should be envious of Japan for its access to quality education for all citizens, regardless of economic standing, for its access to quality medical care for all citizens, regardless of economic standing, for its minimal economic disparity among citizens, for its access to public transport for all citizens, for its tradition of healthful eating and exercise, for its exceedingly low crime rate. So Japan's failing in regard to the justice system is an anomaly. Japan excels in most measures of civilization, but its so-called justice system is an embarrassment. It is worse in some respects than the criminal justice systems in such totalitarian states as China and North Korea. Those nations make little pretense of honoring human rights. They're totally upfront about their disregard for those rights. You know the rules of the game when you ante up. Japan, however, is different. We have the reality here of the presumption of guilt, as the Justice Ministry has affirmed,
Yes.
as the Justice Minister has affirmed.
Yes.
But those in power disguise that reality with the continuing pretense of a presumption of innocence. That's why the Justice Minister freaked when she realized that she had accidentally spoken and written the truth and had thereby exposed the reality of Japanese criminal procedure.
Thank you, Waku. Usually, I get angry when somebody criticize Japan or Japanese system this much. If this person is just a visitor or somebody who doesn't know Japan, but you're here over 40 years, 42 years, and you know the culture inside out, and we are standing on the same side. As you said, even if we could let go 10 guilty persons, we never punish one innocent. And this is the concept we should all aware as a Japanese nationals or anybody who lives in Japan, so that we can go for the change in the system, which everybody, including prosecutors, are suffering. I'd like to know your opinion about the tailors.
Yes. If the U.S. government is responsible for safeguarding the rights of its citizens, if the authorities take that responsibility seriously, then they should never even consider extraditing American citizens to this lawless land of the rising sun. Japan has nothing in the way of human rights for defendants in criminal cases as we perceive those rights in the United States. To give the tailors over to the Japanese would be a gross abuse of their human rights. It would be a gross miscarriage of justice.